Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Test 1, 2, 1, 2. There he is. Happy New Year, Douglas.
Howdy, sir. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Things are going better than I expected this morning, so I'm happy to jump on in here.
Good. You're back in your recording closet in your studio, I see.
I am. Yeah, I know you talked about possibly making this a video podcast, and I can definitely see why. Boy, it's sexy in here.
It's great.
These moving blankets that are stamped property of U-Haul. Not allowed to keep these, but, you know, breaking the law, like they say.
What do they say? A peek behind the curtain, right? A peek behind the packing blanket.
That's right. Yeah, the wizard is in full effect.
Yeah.
How are you doing? You've had a big major surgery, but you're upright. You look bright-eyed.
I'm bright-eyed and bushy cast on my left leg tailed.
That sounds kinky, but all right.
Kinky.
How's that? Yeah, you got your cast on this morning. What color did you go for?
I went for boring old black. Isn't that funny?
Boring old black.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of is until you get out there for your first show and start soaking in the heat.
I said to the nurse, maybe, I don't know who it was who put my cast on, the physical therapist, whatever. I said it's so ironic because Renee and I are all about color. Colored glass, brighter the better. And I went for the absence of color.
Is it the absence or is it the presence of all? What do they say? Isn't black the presence of all colors?
I haven't heard that, but I love it. Okay, I've got the presence of all on my leg.
Yeah, you got the presence of all colors. All right. Yeah, I think you had thrown it out there asking other artists like what color you should go for this time around. And that seems appropriate. It does. And I asked soaking up the heat, when you're out there on the street and you have that cast in there, but at the same time, what are you looking at as far as coming back from this and working again?
My first show is 4 months from now.
Okay.
4.5, actually. I've got another 8 to 10 weeks of recovery time. So this is, I'm only 2 weeks in, but I am a lot more upright and mobile and energetic than I was the last time. So this is good. Yeah. I feel good.
I mean, like you said, you've been through this thing before. You know what to expect. And this sounds like it's going a little bit better than expected. So, Godspeed.
It's weird because I'm trying to, in my head before the surgery, anticipate what, I'm going to have happen because it's been done before. And when I got out of surgery and the day after surgery, I had this really nice nerve block that took all the pain away. And I'm like, I don't remember it being this easy. This is going to be the most fantastic recovery ever. Well, the nerve block wears off the next day, and I was like, I found out that there's this kind of interesting correlation between memory and pain,
Yeah.
Any of us
I do,
Any of us who've been in like in the birthing room with our wives or girlfriends giving birth will know they have that look on their face that says, "Oh my God, I forgot this is happening to me again." Well, that's kind of what happened here.
Exactly. This is why people have second, third, fourth, whatever children, multiple kids. It's because of that pain memory response. So you got your leg baby, and leg baby is starting to push and pull. That's not good.
But it's actually a thing. It's built into our brain that we forget, that we have amnesia. Isn't that crazy? I'd never heard that before.
That really is. That's really interesting. It does make sense as far as what I've understood about childbirth. And, I've never, obviously, I've been kicked in the nuts before, but that's about as hard as it gets. But
which doesn't compare to childbirth, so I'm told.
So you're told. But, I don't want either to happen anymore.
Right.
So let's move on.
Yeah. Well, that's been my exciting break. Tell me about your break from the studio and your holiday time away.
I left some small commission work, like, my work, and, I like to work big. And if I go small, then I just don't like to do small things. And I had a beloved client. I'd done multiple pieces for her in the past, and she had asked me to document this cabin that is right on the edge of Muir Woods in California that her family has owned. And her father passed away, and there were too many kids in the family to ever try to split it up logically.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to sell it, and they were heartbroken about this. And so I'm documenting this cabin. I'm only as good as the reference you give me, you know?
There you go. Yeah.
Can you paint me a portrait of my wife? I'm like, only if I know her,
Right.
you know, or if I've, you know, even a photograph, you're not going to get the same type of thing unless it's like an iconic kind of thing and you're going for that. But I can't necessarily do it unless it's somebody I know. And this was like, she gave me blurry Polaroids to go from. This is the pain of like a 2D liar.
Yeah.
Like myself. I can't imagine you and Renee taking a commission and not really knowing you can nail the colors until you open up the instructions that the client has given you. I just can't imagine you getting yourself in that position. But I didn't even open up the folder until basically the pieces are due.
Okay.
And I'm looking at these references, and I've already been kind of coaxing her along going, oh yeah, things are coming along great.
Yes.
It is. I'm crushing this. It's going to be awesome.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I'm putting it back and back and back. It's due for Christmas. Douglas, I didn't start the goddamn thing until, and this is like 7 little portraits of this house, like 24 by 16. She didn't give me a decent reference of the house. She gave me like 2 blurry Polaroids, like fading, blurry Polaroids that I'm supposed to, and they're like, and they weren't even Polaroids. They were a picture from her phone of the house. And like, it was terrible. It was a
like
nightmare.
studying.
And it was too late.
It's like putting off studying for your big final. You open up the notes the night before.
Yeah.
And you've got no notes.
Yeah. Art show stress dream.
Well, how did you work it out?
I just did it.
You did.
I don't know. I just did it. Made it look blurry.
All right.
I did. I just kind of painted it blurry. So
maybe it's a new direction for you, Will. Blurry illustration art.
Oh yeah, you'll see them in my next booth. That's not where I'm going. But she had all of these elements of things. This is what we loved about. I'm like, it's just a sketch of the house, and I'm looking. I'm like, did I really just paint a blue toilet in this? Like seriously, I painted a blue toilet just right there in the front of all these little things. Like each person got a thing that they loved. Like one person loved the blue bathroom, so hey,
you get
Merry Christmas. You get a blue shitter.
Okay. Okay.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So anyway, I had to do those while my folks were here.
Oh,
and really? My folks visited for the first week of my kids' break. Okay. So we did all of our holidays then.
Yeah.
And then Christmas Day happened, and my wife went back to the studio. She worked. She had like a commission she had to bring to Minnesota. So she was doing that and doing like she was setting diamonds on Christmas Day. And I just kind of did laundry.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we did Minnesota for a week, which is, family has its own anxieties and stresses, and you don't get to eat the way you want to eat and whatever. But it was lovely. We had a killer visit.
Nice. Well, I mean, typically we've had years like that where holidays we're not getting together with family till 2:00. We're in the studio for 3 hours in the morning after the kids have opened their toys and they're off playing. We've often incorporated artist life with personal life, with all that stuff. We juggle it.
You know what they say, Douglas, when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Oh, that's goddamn work, I tell you. That is goddamn work.
Hard work is work. That's right. I'm just quoting memes today. That's all we got. I got nothing. Man, this is funny because I just posted this on social media. God, like 2 hours ago, you were in getting your cast, and this will tell you folks how we prepare for the show. It's like, here it is. Happy New Year.
How we prepare for the show?
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's how we. It's the royal we, but meaning me. This is how I prepare for the show.
I've got notes. Will's seat of his pants.
Well, he did this. Okay, Douglas does this thing, and it's great. We have this shared note on our phone. He'll have all these topics, and I'll do it. It's almost like an anti-topic. The only thing that I added for our hour and a 20-minute long show where we're just catching up, the two of us, here's what I added. I'm sick of the fucking booth shot. Can we stop that? Can we stop helping people with their booth shot? I'm sick to death of it. No more help. No more. So,
So basically, Will's contribution this week was a blurry Polaroid I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's right. It's a subtraction. You know, when they say in, I don't know if you ever did any, I know Douglas did, and I've done it myself, but if you've ever done any improv, they always say it's end your thing with yes and. Never end it with no. And we try to carry that through with the podcast too. It's like if he has a topic that he's super excited about talking about, I try my best, and it's not always that. I don't always stick the landing, but I try my best not to be like, that topic sucks, moving on. No.
If you hear Will say, moving on, it means he's done.
Moving on.
It's time for something else.
That's right. But I am, call it the Bert to your Ernie, but you get into a jury, right?
Yeah.
You get into a jury. The booth shot, it's hack detection. It's like anybody can scribble out for, but in order to see the context, that's where you see the booth. I'll help anybody that comes to me directly, specifically with the booth shot. But I'm tired of all these like, how can we help everybody? It's not the booth shot. It's the actual booth. Like, don't just try to elevate your photograph. Your photograph is what it's like. It's how the jurors see your work in context. And if your context is, it's not as good as I thought it was, then moving on. So with apologies to all of the kinder, more generous people in our community, the lovely, patient, and eloquent Evan Reinheimers of the world, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I know you just said you don't want to talk about it, but I have a reaction to what you were saying, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So I actually am going to try and reiterate what I cut from an episode that we did earlier this year when we were talking about juries and all that kind of stuff. And it came right off the heels of me being on the Art and the Pearl jury. And my feeling on the booth shot is that a lot of times we have a hard time as artists criticizing or improving our actual images of our pieces or elevating our pieces. It's hard. It's personal. That's where we need to really have our focus is on the work. But it's hard to criticize somebody and say, work on your work. Even ourselves to say we need to get better at our work. And it almost seems like the booth shot becomes our scapegoat of if I just keep getting a better booth shot, that'll be the solution to get me in. And I think we need to...
Or the magic order of, it's like dating, right?
Yeah.
The show's just not that into you this year.
Right.
You're like,
And I also feel like the booth shot is at the end of the line. For a lot of the shows that are doing not projection anymore, but are doing it monitor. And I felt like from my experience with jurying, you see an image. And then you want the next image to give you that, oh. And the next image to build on it and go, whoa. And then, whoa. And then you want to see it in context and you don't want it to go. So make sure your booth shot doesn't be a letdown. That's really it.
It's just context, though. It just puts your work in context and it says whether you're a pro or not. And it's okay if you're not totally a pro. There are shows for you. And then you can move on and you can whatever. And then you look at the other people around you and look at the display and then you work on it. But taking a magic picture, doesn't exist.
Right.
Moving on.
Yeah. Moving on.
He's on to me,
He doesn't
folks.
even realize he does it anymore.
I didn't. Yeah. I was like, I don't say moving on. Moving on. All right.
All right.
Yes,
I wonder if Susan
right.
ever gets the moving on.
Fuck no, I'm not going to say moving on to my beautiful wife. Heck no.
Like, Will, you watch yourself.
Well, we've known each other better enough now. Like, I don't even have to say anything to be like, why are you arguing with me? I'm like, I didn't say anything. It's like, she knows. She already knows. She's perfect.
So is today your first official day back in the studio from the break, or?
It's my first official day walking into my studio.
Okay.
And I'm not getting anything done talking to you.
Okay. Well, as you would say, we'll keep this one tight so you can get to work.
Well, no. I mean, I started out my studio day. I met with my ex and had coffee and talked about how to, juggle shows and kids and trips and volleyball and activities and all this stuff. And that went better than expected. And, we're on the same team as far as that goes. And now talking to my art show wife here on the podcast. I got to talk to you, and I got stuff to do at home, so I got to go home and help move in a piece of furniture we got coming. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, they kindly agreed. It's a jeweler's bench, actually. So
okay.
it's a new jeweler's bench for the new year.
Oh, cool.
And they're going to deliver it. It's solid wood,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Big bench. Jewelers out there know they have to be very sturdy in order to support the sawing and the hammering and all this stuff. So super heavy piece of furniture.
So from
and they're
IKEA, right? I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Just put it together with a little Allen wrench when I get home. But they drop it and they're like, we'll only deliver to the curb.
Mm.
I got $20, says you'll take it a little farther, but we'll see how it goes. I got to be there when it
spender.
gets there. Fuck yeah, dude. High roll. I just flick those things around. Stand next to me, you get a 20. All right. How about you? What's going on?
Our studio, of course, I'm on a break, obviously, but
Yeah.
we blew glass right up to the day before surgery, and we shut things down. And of course, a glass blowing studio has a little bit more infrastructure and complexities than, say, a painting studio or whatever. So we
course.
killed power to the ovens, and we'll deal with them when it's time to get back in there again. Well, Renee went back out to check on things and see how everything looked. And sure enough, we have some furnace repairs, let's say, coming up in our future. So that's never a fun thing. It's not going to be like last time where we had to completely tear it apart, rebuild it because it had been a 15, 20-year furnace that needed a complete overhaul. This is just yearly or every other year kind of maintenance type stuff, but it's still a pain in the ass.
Let me ask you this. Is a furnace kind of like an old car? Like if you, if I noticed, like if I'm driving, and I had this old Pontiac when I was, in my teens to 20s, almost to 30s.
Okay.
I had it forever. This 76 Pontiac Grand Prix.
Uh-huh.
That was my grandfather's. Loved that car, but it was the type of thing, like I drove it a certain way. I could get it started. But then other people can't get it started.
Mm-hmm.
You get somebody else driving it, or if you shut it off for a couple of weeks, then it kind of breaks down. Is that what you're dealing with?
It isn't sort of. I mean, we don't want to bring in like studio rentals or people to use the studio like when we're not in there for that purpose alone, because the equipment is such a huge endeavor, cost, maintenance. We don't want anyone else messing it up. We want our hands on it so it's there when we need it. But in this particular case, there are just components that break down over time. Our heating elements made of moly B disilicide. It's basically like, I know, mainly like glass.
Sorry, what's that?
Yeah, it's not like an element. It's glass, and then the electricity goes through those elements. Super delicate, super fine, but they can put out a lot of heat. 2,100 degrees to be exact. So anyway, when they got shut off, one of them just had a weak point, came apart, boom, that broke. And then the crucible that holds all of the glass, it's like the shell that holds molten clear glass. It starts to eat through. The glass eats through that crucible. And so it just ate through it a little bit quicker than we had anticipated. So, I mean, there's just those normal complexities with having a glass blowing studio that we have to prepare for, that we always have to have in the back of our mind that something is going to happen. And I've been reading this book. It's about you know it because you sent me the book. It's called The Endurance. It's about
It's about the Shackleton exploration of Antarctica. The ship gets frozen in the ice.
Exactly.
And it's about
So I'm at the point.
If you guys, here's our IAP book club, but honestly, one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. I've already read it twice, but it's just the ship is called The Endurance, and it's about these men who go on this expedition and just disaster after disaster after disaster, and each one of the men keeps a diary. So, it's interesting to hear like the perspectives of the different men. So,
well, what is really
anyway, go ahead.
What about the story that is really resonating with me is all about like you have this idea or this anticipation of what this hard journey is going to be, and that often comes across with, having a glass blowing studio, and we shut the studio down, and it's like we have these plans that we have the work made. We're going to be able to go back to the studio, flip it on, and just roll right back into our season like normal. But it's almost like the Endurance getting frozen into the Antarctic Ocean. It's like they stayed in that boat, that ship, for a year, thinking, or almost a year, thinking that the ice would break and they could just keep on going down through the ocean until they realized that the ship is literally being crushed. So they have to adjust and they have to keep moving forward. And I feel like these things come up and we just keep moving forward. So I'm really enjoying that. And thank you, by the way, for sending that to me.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you're reading it. I thought it would resonate with you being, there's a claustrophobia element to it, and kind of being a captive in your own skin that I know you're dealing with right now, that I think you've handled pretty damn well, both that last time and into this time. At least you know what to expect.
Well, depending on the day. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I'm sure a lot of artists out there are with me at this time of the year. If you're not out on the road doing shows already, right into your season, for those of us who are kind of like home, either working in the studio, planning for the future, there's that uneasiness that comes in, that creeps in, that makes you just want to figure out what everything's going to be like. What's it going to be?
Right.
So.
Right. There's so much uncertainty in our business anyway. And, is this show that I have always made money at, are they going to let me back in?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to rain? Is it going to whatever? I mean, it's like, I feel like the holidays end and there's all this money going out. So all of your end of the year money is going out to family and gifts and travel and all this shit. And then you go directly into the rent being due for the first 6 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants their booth fee. So it's like, okay, here's $500 to $1,000 for however many shows you do. So you got all of this is going out. And then everybody's like, I'm supposed to be in my studio working. And it's like, you get a hit, you take that hit, you don't get into that show that you wanted to do, and you take that hit and you're shitty, and you get online, you're like, somebody's like, I got into this show. Have you ever heard it? And it's your favorite show and you didn't get in. You're just like, yeah, I've heard of it. And then you just want to rip them. Oh, yeah, just rip them a new one. Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. That's how adorable you got in. You have fun selling your doodads. And it's just it's a weird time of the year, and we're all on edge, and especially the uncertainty of where you are going to go, or if you're going to, or if your dumbass is going to agree to go to Miami, and then your dumbass is going to agree to turn back around and have 10 days to get to California.
Who would ever do something like that? I mean, who would do that?
You have to be a real moron. That's who would do that. Bert. That's who would do it. Bert.
I
did it.
My co-host. That's the one who did it.
And I'm looking at these spots, and it's like, they're my first two shows. Miami and California. I need a guy. Anybody got a guy? Send me a guy. I need a guy to drive. You got to be reasonable. How much do you pay the guy?
Oh, and they've got to have their own vehicle.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't have a van. I have no van.
Damn.
I'll rent it.
Well, there's the yearly recap.
Enterprise is super excited about just renting to somebody, and we're like, who's the other driver? I don't know. It'll just be a guy. I'll find somebody. Like,
it'll work out. It'll work out. I mean,
it always does.
I have to actually take a break from the 24-hour news cycles too, because that stuff is toxic.
Oh,
it's just crazy. And this is going to be one of those years.
Let's surround ourselves with a bubble where we can just constantly just turn it on fire and turn it over in our head. And I'm going to mention this other book that I read at the end of last year that I mentioned last time. One of the top takeaways that I took from Stolen Focus by Johan Kari is that Facebook only exists. It is only successful, and it is more successful if you don't turn it off. And you don't turn it off if you're pissed off. So the more it makes you angry and the more it turns things over and shows you this bile, then the more you won't turn it off. So you are addicted to poison. So it's not just a conspiracy theory. This is the way Facebook is run. So turn the goddamn thing off and go about your business and make good art and quit getting on Facebook and telling people they're hacks.
And you know what else kind of tricks me into getting on those things? On the different social media platforms is, okay, so I know that it's not good for me personally unless I keep it very tight. Like I've created my Instagram, my personal Instagram now for people who I would walk up to and have a conversation with because we are friends, and I'm keeping it tight in that group. But I feel like what gets slippery for me is I'm like, well, no, I'm doing this to promote the podcast, or I'm on to promote our business. There are some artists whose business model do so well on social media. And so I'm not knocking that business model and saying that is garbage. But for me...
it's a requirement.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. But for me, I don't know how you feel, but a lot of the engagement in those particular types of reasons to be on social media is friends. It's other artist friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily transcending my collectors. My collectors aren't there. My collectors are at shows or have collected from us for years. And I don't know, maybe they're too old or not interested and they reach out directly.
Right.
That has been my struggle with social media. And one other thing about Johan Hari, because I wanted to bring him up, I was going to say, I wonder if what we were talking about, what you were saying about his book or sharing some insights about it, if I have a phone addiction, if when I am post-surgery, any of us who've been put under anesthesia and you're waking up and you're in the recovery room and you hear the nurses do that like old man talk to you like, Douglas, are you awake? Can you hear me? Talking like you're in a nursing home or something.
Right.
And I'm starting to come to and I hear them say, what are you doing? And I go, just a minute. Are you okay? Are you awake? Or blah, blah, blah. And I said, wait till I finish this. And I'm looking down at my thumbs as I'm waking up. And they're like, Douglas, what are you doing? I go, I just have to send this text really quick. And then all of a sudden, as I'm waking up, I'm realizing I don't have my phone in my hands. I don't have blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's true. Those phone addictions are real. And if they are in your mind, even when you're under anesthesia, that's pretty scary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got you good.
Got me good.
It's got you good.
Got its
Feed
hooks
that
in
monkey.
me.
Yep. I got a text right now. I wasn't even listening to what you were saying. I was reading it. I'm kidding.
I know. I know you're kidding because I'm looking at your face and you're not looking down.
I know you're looking at my face. My eyes are shrouded with the light above and it's glinting off my gigantic forehead. So you can't see. I'm looking down. You can't tell. All right. So be careful, be mindful, be kind, and do that stuff. And then we'll move on. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
So I've started using the events list feature in Zap to search up some different shows to fill those holes in my schedule.
I feel like I should have something to say, but I wasn't really listening to you because I'm looking at the events list right now, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so you drop the menu down, and there at the bottom, go scrolling all the way, about third thing down in the smaller print, it just says events list.
That's right. All of the shows appear here regardless of their application deadline. You can use the filtering and the sorting to narrow down your search so that you can find that right show that fills your desired time frame or location.
I know a lot of people love that calendar. I like seeing the list of events. I like scrolling through and doom scrolling late at night. It's like online dating. They don't let you swipe left or right, but you can figure out who you want to date in the coming up year.
Another topic that it was funny. I threw that thing on there online and said, are there any topics moving forward that you'd like us to address?
Yeah.
And our old friend David Bjerstrom commented, and he was like, I'd love to hear you guys talk about the hidden costs of running a show and the secret costs. And I'm like, well, I don't know what they are.
Right.
I will have somebody, I promise. That is interesting. We'll talk to somebody that has done that. And and we have some.
I do have some insight with that because,
Okay.
I've learned a lot being on the board for NAIA because we work together with show directors and other artists, and we get to learn about both sides of the industry.
And I do, of course,
Yeah.
Just being aware and being friends with directors and things, and we hear and we talk, and I'm aware, and I like to be informed, but I also kind of I don't feel comfortable enough talking about it, but Go ahead.
Well, I think that for one, the costs of insurance, the costs of security, the costs of things to putting on festivals post-COVID have become huge. And I feel like we talk about with social media, we are in a very divided world right now. It's like this camp or that camp. And I feel like it's very easy for all of us or triggering for us to fall into this us against them. And show directors versus artists is not a healthy dichotomy for people to get into because we are all cogs in the big wheel of this industry. And so I feel like we need to kind of like step back and find common ground on that and not feel like we're just getting gouged by this show and they don't care about us, you know?
Well, I feel like everybody feels like everybody has their hand out for more and more and more, you know, and it's like, well, the show has their hand out. They want more from me, you know, and you first get into the business. It's like, oh, $15, $20 for an application. And you're like, oh, this guy wants 25. And then the first person that needed 50 came along and now everybody's charging 50.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's, you know, the shows are like, Zap is charging us this. We have to pass on the thing. We're like, the show is charging us this. And it's like, well, the city wants X amount of dollars for this and they don't want this. And then the communities, everybody seems to have their hands out. So there are hidden fees everywhere. Everything costs money. Nobody's giving away the street for free, parking, hotel blocks. It's just,
and there's a scarcity thing. I mean, there's a scarcity thing we're all dealing with, not feeling like we've got enough, you know, enough of what we need to make that bottom line work. So, I mean, I understand the struggle and the concern and the worry behind it, and it's tough. But I think to answer the question, you know, maybe going forward this year, I would be interested in, I mean, we've had a couple show directors on in the past, but I'd be interested in this. We haven't done this yet, and I've been wanting to, is to have some conversations with artists who have gone on to also, you know, produce shows that kind of have a dual role. They have their foot in both worlds, you know, like the artists who maybe are part of a collective, a board that puts a show on for artists. I would like to see, I'd like to hear about that process, and maybe because they would come from our vantage point to kind of know what can and can't be done, and just to bring that to the listeners.
That's interesting. I ran into Debbie Allen in Cherry Creek, and she was potentially, she and Howard are potentially interested too. Really? So it'd be cool to get a both sides of that too on a group that is used to not only dealing with one community but multiple communities as like as a business model. So that would be kind of cool to get that side too. It's something we could ask of those guys if we can. If I mention them by name, maybe that holds their feet to the fire.
Sure
we
does.
Can get that going for this year. And maybe that's probably, to be honest, it's more me than it is them because I haven't reached out again, but I need to do that because they're. I've always gotten along with those guys, so it'd be fun to talk to them.
Well, speaking of them, I mean, there's a lot of folks have hit the road this week, and they are down there in Florida, and they're doing the Florida weekend after weekend, you know, where they've got that run from the beginning of January through March. So sending out a big shout out to them for those artists who are doing that. That used to be our thing. I mean, we wouldn't maybe do every weekend. We might fly home for a spell and go back down again. But I think that for us is a thing of the past. I don't think our business model is sustainable for that kind of a tour.
You know,
for now.
And never say never. You never know when you're going to be going back and trying to squeeze that turnip again.
Yeah, right.
Just keep milk that cow, milk that Florida shaped teat.
I mean, I would do a tour of 3, but 10. No, not possible.
I used to look at Florida as one show. I'd look at try to look at it as one, not just one show, but as like you said, a tour.
I get it.
You're like, well, here's my goal for this tour. It was always a little trickier to get the money that I wanted out of your typical show, out of a Florida run. But it just is what it is. It's a different business model.
It feels like some of it. Like whatever show you choose to be at down there, it kind of feels, I don't want to say random because it's not random, but it does feel like the collectors that see you that weekend might not be at that particular show, but next weekend, 20 miles north, they might catch you there, you know? So looking at it as a long game for that season always is what got me through.
A lot of those guys do travel, you know, they do travel to different locales, especially for those big shows that they like and the ones that they consider to be their favorites. I mean, my parents, it's hilarious. They are huge collectors of American craft, and a lot of you guys know them, whether you know it or not, because they go by and they buy kind of on the smaller scale, and they buy a lot more intricate craft work. And They love wood carving and
cool.
pottery and but I've had different artists be like, "Oh my God, those are your parents!" Like, because I'll have to be like, "Oh, can you stop by this booth and pick up my teapot?" And it's that's not how my mom sounds. But being that, but they have, my point being that they have their shows that they think are the creme de la creme of their favorite shows.
Right.
And they're big Longs Park people. They love Longs Park and they love going up to Pennsylvania and staying in their favorite spots. And
is that a bit of a travel from Virginia?
Yeah, it's about 3 or 4 hours. So they make a big weekend out of it. Mm-hmm. It's, up in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, and they go up and they have their favorite shows that they think, you and I have our favorite shows that we think, oh my God,
right.
Cherry Creek and Fort Worth and Artisphere and, yada, 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 the list goes on, Des Moines. But they're like, no, the best shows in the country are like a little tiny show in Charlottesville.
Okay.
And Longs Park. And they've come to some of the other ones, and they're not wrong. That's just what they like. So it's similar to the way, I don't know, different people run their business models. But
well, I do feel like over the years, and I know this is a topic we've covered a lot, and maybe this is a little bit of a different slant on it, is we do in our minds kind of create these particular shows that we think if we don't get into those shows, we are not going to have the year we want. But I'll tell you, last year, there were a couple shows that I wasn't too excited about. It was kind of like, well, I got in and I didn't get into the other thing I wanted, and I'm going to show up and do it. And I'll tell you, if I didn't get some nice, surprising commissions, sales, feedback, it led to other stuff. So I do think it's important for people to really just look at forced breaks sometimes, a rejection or an injury or a recovery. I know this sounds hippy-dippy, but to say rejection is protection, so to speak. You are being put in the location you should be that year. So have faith and go with a good attitude, because if you go with a shitty attitude, you're for sure going to screw up potential opportunities for yourself. So
hang on, there's a disturbance in the force.
Oh,
like a bunch of listeners here. They're in my headphones telling me to fuck off. I didn't get into the show. You know what? It's easy for you to say, Sigworth.
Why is it easy for me to say?
Yeah, it's easy for you to say. Yeah, it sure is. I didn't get into my favorite show again, so F off. Here's the math on it, though. Yeah. It's like, if I don't get A, then I got to do B, C, and D to make up for it.
I know.
And it's every bit of time away from the family. It's like, there's no A anymore. You don't get the A. Now that's 3 more weekends to make up for A. Yeah. And it's like, so if you're into the creme de la creme and you've got the sweet ass schedule sliding all the way through, Jesus ain't going to help you. You're going to have to go grind it. So that's where I'm looking at. It's like, that's
Will takes the wheel, not Jesus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's all up to me. Yeah. I'm not taking. Jesus doesn't care about art shows.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely get into that headspace. So I'm not gonna sound like I don't ever go there, but I try to think of some of these biggies that I get into once every 3 years as I'm in, but I need to, in my mind, think of this as my 3-year entry for this show versus my yearly entry for this show, if that makes sense. So I don't get myself all bogged down with, now this is my new level or this is my new expectation or something.
Yeah, I guess.
I know.
I'm calling bullshit.
Okay,
but, I reserve the right. I still think there's some teeth gnashing.
Of course. I mean, I'm not saying when I don't get into my show, I don't gnash my teeth.
Yeah.
But
all right.
I try and...
Let's...
all right.
Mr. Positive
Moving
and Mr.
on.
Realism. This is how we're working this one. I'm going to be a different Sesame Street character for the rest of the episode. What are we looking at next?
Well, so during these breaks, that we're away and kind of, taking holiday breaks, or if we're on kind of a seasonal break, what are some of the things that you do to stay inspired more mentally, not necessarily about design of ideas for work, but how do you kind of stay engaged in your, in staying positive and uplifted?
Oh, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
I think we made that abundantly clear. I try to go through it. No, I try to go through it bit by bit, and I'll tell you this: this is not the answer to your question, but you say not maintain creativity, but that is my big goal for this year is to kind of scratch some of those creative outlets that I've let go and go back to some new ideas. And I'm sketching more, I'm writing more at the beginning of the day to try to come up with new ideas and new ways to take ideas that are favorites of mine that I like to lean into. You know, there are certain themes in my booth that I don't want to let go because I love them still. And I may have done those for a while, but how can I continue to make myself interested by those and keep the creativity flowing around those ideas, as well as coming up with new ones that accent some of my favorite themes. So that's if I have a New Year's resolution, it's how to become more creative and to continue my voice. So that would be, that's where I'm at.
So are you saying part of your process is when you said writing every day, are you like journaling thoughts, journaling ideas, doing sketches of things? Is that kind of a daily practice for you?
I'm trying to make it more. When I am at my most successful in the studio, it's when I'm firing on, and I call it kind of firing on all those cylinders, and it's like creativity and line quality and productivity. And those are my three big ones. And, I feel like sometimes, I'm trying to get away from the phone and all this stuff, but like if creativity takes a hit, then and then sales too, that would be the fourth one. Then the other ones take a hit too, because I'm not as excited about the work. I'm not getting into the shows that I want. I'm not doing this. So it's all this kind of, you have to keep all of those, I think, firing at once.
It's like a vicious cycle. If one of those is off kilter, if the out of balance, it can affect all the others.
Right. And some people have the $1 million idea and they can just keep milking it. But then eventually that gets kind of stale and people can smell it on you. And then you start to kind of get complacent. So I'm trying to fight complacency and move my work into where I want it. And I've never really, I'm typically right there in it, but maybe towards the second half of last year, the new ideas that I was coming up with last year weren't hitting as far as people buying them.
Okay.
So then you kind of try to figure out the other part of the Venn diagram that is still working financially that pays your bills. So how about you guys? I know you've got an answer.
Well, you've given me a couple of things I want to react to. And I guess the first one is kind of the staying inspired to do what we do. And I feel like I get a lot of inspiration from sources like documentaries or I'm a real documentary person. Renee and I, during this break, we decided to subscribe to Masterclass.
Okay.
And do you know anything about that?
I do, yeah.
It's super cool. I mean, there's like hundreds or maybe even thousands of speakers speaking on their creative business, entrepreneurial type thinking or what their practices are. And even though you wouldn't think, well, there's a direct correlation, I seem to find something in there that resonates with me. And even if it's just their connection to something, to a process or what inspires them, inspires me to look internal and get excited and get in the studio and do what we do.
A lot of those people in the arts, I mean, a lot of those things different. Even if somebody is like writing a song about, being on the road and being away from their families, like those things translate to what we do, being creative and creating a creative life. Those all translate, whether it's music or film or production or songwriting or a lot of those. Like the Rick Rubin book I found to be really inspirational, and I've really gone back to that one. And that one too is this one that came out last year. It's some kind of bottom shelf philosophy that's super reachable and digestible that you can just pick up and just read a page or two and then put it back down, and you could read the same page every day and it means something different to you too.
And I came across on my Spotify account that is included in having a membership with Spotify, that I have access to that. And that's one of those things that I brought up last year, and I've never gotten a chance to read or listen to. So that's one of my goals is to, I'm sure that's one of those things you can put on and come back to almost like a podcast and jump back in
totally.
at any point.
Yeah, I don't actually recommend reading it start to finish. It is not a narrative, and it's not something you're going to lose the thread on.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you can actually just pick up and read a chapter of. Cool. There's a lot of blank space within the book, too, to let your mind rest, which when I first picked it up, I thought it was like, you didn't write a book, you wrote a pamphlet, because there's not an awful lot there are not that many words to it, but the thoughts are pretty profound.
Nice.
So Rick Rubin's, what is it? It's got a big circle and a dot.
Oh, right. The Creative Act.
The Creative Act.
The Creative Act.
By Rick Rubin. That's the name of the book.
Well, I wanted to react to what you were saying about when things aren't all firing on all cylinders and how maybe one thing is out of balance, which then affects everything else in that circle. And I'd have to say that I struggled with that last year big time. This has been the hardest 2 years physically for me, I would say, out of my entire life. So because everything that I had to deal with was through the lens of physical problems, that tipped everything on its axis. And I've extended myself in a lot of different areas. I'm not going to get into the details of what they are, but the balance was way out of shift. So Renee and I had a New Year's meeting this week, and we've got new goals, and we've got some exciting plans for ourselves that really are energizing me and getting me excited to kind of refocus and recalibrate so that creating artwork isn't just my job, that it's the thing I get inspired to do and have a good time doing and dream new things up. So I'm seeing the physical thing almost like I'm over the hump, and I'm excited to get to the other side and to see what the future brings. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Well, I'm excited for you. It sounds good. It's funny, we do put a lot of energy into the podcast, and I know that takes away some of our energy for artwork. So I'm trying to figure out where to weed the garden.
There's going to be a balance. I know we don't know exactly how it's going to take shape. We both really like what we're doing with this, but it might be taking too much of our other focus. We might have to recalibrate, and we don't know what that means. So we'll figure that out and get back to you.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
In line with staying up mentally, I feel like, having all this time on my hands, the mind just goes crazy, right? I mean, we've all talked about the mental health of being sidelined. But what I'm trying to get to the heart of it is I think to myself, it is, for me, about this perfectionism. And I've always hated it when people say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, because in that statement alone, it makes it sound like, well, I only aspire to do really great things. And being a perfectionist, in my mind, or my definition, isn't about everything you only want to do greatness. It's that you feel like everything you do is shit. You know what I'm saying? And then that is the thing that is so hard to overcome. Do you ever deal with any of that kind of that feeling?
Yeah, I've got them all. Every different kind of anxiety that you want to talk about, I've got them. I've got the imposter syndrome. I've got inferiority. I mean, it just is all. I mean, we all kind of deal with our own things, and I think anybody who says different is either lying or just an asshole. I know there are those of us out there who are super confident in their work, and I'm jealous of those guys, but I think we all hit our demons. I think, the photographers out there, I've talked to a bunch of friends of mine. I've got a bunch of friends that are photographers that, they deal with the way other artists look at them, and where they're like, oh, it's just, they think I just push a button and take a picture, and they don't think about the reams and reams and reams of photos that I have to take before I get one that I actually like. Whereas jewelers, their booths are, you can't just walk past a jeweler's booth and glance at it and know what they're all about. I mean, you can look in my booth, you can cut your eyes in my booth or yours and tell pretty much what we're all about. But in order to see a jeweler's booth, you have to go. And so typically a jeweler's booth has more people in it, and it's a lot more of a different kind of engagement. So the grass is always greener.
That's interesting. That perfectionism translating into what people think of us and other artists and our peers. It's interesting because I do and have over the years maybe had a different perception of what I thought people thought. Like I would think, oh, they think, let's say something negative that is haunting me and in my head. And then somebody will come up and say something that is kind of positive and uplifting, and it feels good. And I think, I guess I misread that. I thought that, this is the perception of me and my work. And it always makes me come back to the idea that we're so worried about what people think about us or of our work or what we do, when the reality is they probably think very little about it. I don't mean little in terms of status, but in like the amount of time they actually think about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, how much space it occupies in their head is pretty small.
We build it up in our heads so much more than maybe what's real or actual.
Right, exactly.
So what are some of the other questions that we got from online? Did you want to take a look at that? And see what
I wanted to bring this up. Well, this was a good segue into what we've kind of been talking about anyway, but our good friend Jay McDougall chimed in and he wanted to know our different, because you asked me how I keep up, and I don't know if you maybe had read this ahead of time, but he was like, what do you do to stay? He literally says, what do you do to stay up and positive at a show, countered by pitfalls to avoid? Like, what do you do to stay positive? And I mean, I know what I've got, and God, I love Jay. I mean, he's one of my favorite humans. But
how do I stay positive? I talk to Jay McDougall. He usually cheers me up.
That's a pitfall right there, my friend. You got to stay away from that guy. Better wait till he's got his salmon-colored pants on. That's how he stays away. That's his kryptonite.
Yeah. Honestly, I am in a partnership with a woman who cuts to the heart of things. She sees the gold. She just knows how to turn my mood around. I mean, I'm not saying she doesn't ever get down or she doesn't ever get worried or have, normal human emotion like that. But she really is truly one of the most inspirational people I know who can put things into focus and she really is unflappable.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, she's got like, what I've noticed about Renee just being close to you guys at shows and to get her to know a little bit better, but it's almost like a bedside manner. She's a doctor, like she would have made an excellent surgeon where she could come in and talk to the person and be like, hey, it's, you're having a bad time right now. It may not always be, right. Not that she's always positive, but it's like, look, this show is a cancer diagnosis and I'm still going to tell you, you're going to feel okay about it. Here's how you get through it.
Yep.
A to Z.
And tomorrow will be a better day and whatever. It's like not.
Or even if it's not, this is how we're going to deal with it.
Right.
And it's like, kind of, I've been lucky enough to know several people, and my father-in-law is like that, and he was, the world up there in Fergus Falls was lucky enough to have him as a surgeon, and he was that way. And I remember getting pneumonia a few years back, and the way he dealt with me in not wanting to go to the doctor. And I was talking to him about it. He was like, well, what's this like? And he's like, well, I had a temperature of 104 and had this, kind of burny, itchy thing in my lung. And I'm like, he's like, well, you got pneumonia and you need to get diagnosed and order a thing. And we're going to go over here. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll do that first thing in the morning. And he was like, well, you'll go now. And I'm like,
matter of fact.
And I don't even remember arguing with him. He was just like, well, yeah, you'll go now. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, I see Renee being that kind of way, but it's, if you can have those kinds of people in your surrounding, that's the positive one. Yeah. Another is if you're lucky enough, this is, I believe in getting your mood right and shaking it off. And there are certain things that people can say to me that in the past have sent me spiraling and they piss me off. And I just kind of go down and I've kind of gotten used to that it's like, I realize that the terrible things people say to you typically it's not them trying to be mean. It's them trying to figure out a way to relate to you because they think you are, your work is I said this so many times, but like the hot person in the bar that you really want to talk to. And then you just step on your tongue and they're just stepping on their tongue and they're not trying to say anything mean. But it still takes me a minute and I'll just walk behind my booth and I'll just kind of do some stretches and kind of opened myself back up. Another way, and this is a good one, Mr. Hooper. If you've ever been lucky enough to be near Tim Hooper at a show, Mr. Hooper Art, one of my very favorite people. I've got so many, but God, he's great.
Yeah.
But I remember being really down at a show years and years ago, and he stuck his head out of the back of his booth. I know I've said this before, but here's my 2-word mantra, or 3. Sorry, it's a name and a word, 3 words. Visualize Paul Lynde. That's what he said to me. And he's like, "Hey, man, when you're feeling really bummed out, just visualize Paul Lynde." And I was putting my boxes back together, and, and again, I apologize for repeating stories, but I've only got so many of them, and we're in year, 3, 4? This shit, how long have we been doing this?
I think we're starting number 4.
Starting 4.
Starting 4.
All right. So I'm repeating my stories, but man, you cannot, if you know who Paul Lynde is, you can't get pissed off. Like, it's just, you can't be mad if you're thinking about Paul Lynde. And I'm putting my boxes together and chuckling about it. And it's like, find your Paul Lynde, the inner God, just most ridiculous thing that still makes you in a good mood, and try to do that.
And for anyone younger than a Gen X, you might have to Google him and watch him on YouTube. But yes, he is definitely, well, I mean, what you're saying, this is something too that came to mind when you said that, is humor, of course, humor. And a movie that we just cycled back to, it came out like, I think 2017. Do you remember the Daniel Day-Lewis movie, Phantom Thread?
No,
it's the one.
I never saw that one.
It was his last movie that he said he was done doing movies after that, and got big acclaim. Anyway, he's a dressmaker, House of something. Can't remember what the last name was. It's a period piece, totally renowned, creative artist, blah, blah, blah. And he's so in his head, and he's so particular, and everything, the world just rises and falls and sets on him. And he has this total mood about him where he gets inspired by a woman, a muse, and then he immediately falls out of favor with her. And every little thing, the noise from the toast scraping gets under his skin, and any noise distracts his creative process, and he gets just so like put out, and then he puts her out, and then he moves on to another muse. So the whole story is about him finding this muse who's kind of like meets his match. She like sees that he is so into himself, and it's not good. And she calls him this fussy little man. She says he's just a fussy little man, and he needs to be broken from that. Then it takes a turn, and it just gets outrageous. She secretly starts poisoning him with mushrooms so that he can become very sick. He becomes powerless. He has to rely on her to nurse him back to health. And that whole process gets him out of his own way, and he becomes less of a fussy little man until he cycles back into being a fussy little man again. Well, then he realizes what she's doing. He embraces the fact that he needs to be broken and be brought back, and he embraces this whole cycle.
Wow.
That story, it was like, that is such the artist in their head. They need to be broken from their own sense of who they are. You know what I mean? And let go of control to be reborn again. And so stuff like that, those little mantras, those little comical stories help me just think, I don't want to be a fussy little man.
Yeah. It's fine. I used to have a few beers at the shows, and I don't really do that anymore. Mm-hmm. But I'll have one maybe if somebody, if Genna Khrushchevenko buys me a beer, I've never not sold a painting. Or we switched it to coffee at Old Town a couple of years ago, but it's always that way. He's like, let's give it a try. And he comes in, he brings me a drink, and I'm like, oh man, let's get this going.
Magic elixir.
It has more to do with, getting your head right and forgetting about the things that are pissing you off or whatever. I tell you though, I mean, I don't enjoy talking to people about, casts and injuries and things like that, because that gets people out of the mind of wanting to talk to you about. It's like having a cute dog in your booth. Mm-hmm. People want to talk about the dog. They want to talk about the cast. They want to do whatever that is besides the work that's in front of them. So
it's the distraction.
It's tough to shake that. You only get 2.5 paces, right? Wasn't that what 10 feet is? It's like it's like 3 yards, you know, and 2.5, 3 paces, and you're gone. Anything that distracts you or distracts the customer, it's And sitting in your booth, nobody wants to go into the empty booth, so I always try to move around. But
just keep the energy up and engaging, and that's how you keep the mood up. That's how you keep the buying energy up, is thinking about engagement. And that's worked. That's worked for me anyway. Especially this year when I had to have my ass plopped in a chair the whole show.
That's true. Yeah, but so many people do. I mean, you did a good job of kind of being on the edge of your seat, though, and you still felt like a presence in the booth without, and it's not an option to stand for a lot of us. A lot of us are getting older and have, foot issues or whatever else.
Maybe you, not me.
Right. Not me. I got taps on my toes. Get going. Anyway, make a lot of noise, be jingly.
Back to like goals for the upcoming year. We've touched on it a little bit. Do you have anything else that you've kind of had rolling around in your head for the year that you'd like to focus on or to change or to improve upon?
Yeah, I've got a whole thing I'm going to do this year, which I'm just going to get my money right and make sure I'm not spending so much on things. And that's my big goal is getting my money right, making sure I'm paying myself enough so that I'm not paying the tax man as much at the end of the year, blah, blah, blah. So
the business
getting
side.
a good accountant.
Get the business
business plan. Yeah. So getting all that stuff straight, but God, I can't imagine a drier topic to talk about.
Well, no, I mean, we're all sitting down and thinking about the year coming up, and we've talked about a couple of things, but one of the things that Renee and I have been thinking about and try out is this has been something that we kind of broached a few years ago with another artist. We have a similar aesthetic, similar inspirations and whatnot. We're going to work on a collaboration. And so we've never worked like that before. I mean, I guess Renee and I collaborate with each other, and you and I collaborate with each other here. But creating a body of work that in our mind is going to be elevated, maybe beyond the street, maybe something that might be more corporate.
What's wrong with the street?
Nothing's wrong with that, but I think I want to do less traveling with getting older.
Okay.
And I think we want to step into bigger projects that might be a little more involved.
Interesting. Is this creating a piece or is this creating a body of work?
A body of work that is a merging of what us and this other person that we're working with, and starting getting the ball rolling with ideas and having it be open-ended enough that this collaboration can go places we weren't expecting. And I find that is just the act of doing that, whether it just turns into infusing energy back into our own work, or if it does turn into a very successful body of work that we form another kind of business model, collaboration, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about the opportunity and the direction with that. And one of the things that our sponsor, Zap, might be interested to know that I looked into this week was I logged onto Cafe, which is a call for entry.
Kind of a competitor website.
It's basically the Zapplication. It's a sister company for Zapplication. Yeah. And it's for...
Wait, sister company or competition?
It's under the umbrella of Weststaff.
Oh, okay. All right.
So whereas Zapplication is focused on art fairs, Cafe is for public works, corporate works, exhibitions. They have all these different... It's basically like logging into Zap. You create a profile of that kind of body of work that you want to put out there. I mean, it's a lot more nuanced. With art shows, art festivals that we do, they kind of fall under a similar vein. You show up, you put up a tent, you do the show, that kind of thing. Where this is so many different opportunities that you can read about and find out if you're right for that and apply.
Interesting. So grants too?
Grants
is that the type of thing? Would they do grants? Okay.
I think so,
all right.
Yeah.
Is it open to everyone, or do you have to be...
It's free to create a profile.
Be a little fancier.
Just like Zap, creating a profile. And then you can look at all the call to entries. Now, some of the costs are dependent upon each opportunity. Some of the opportunities, there might be an application fee. Some of them might be you just apply for free, and then they choose who they want to work with. And then there's negotiation about budget and all that kind of stuff. So that's something we're looking into.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out myself. I've been interested in some public work kind of things, and I've been I saw Laura Young, Chris Jackson is her partner, and he runs that Jackson Young Gallery in Chicago that I show my work in.
Nice.
But she just did an amazing mural, public works piece, and I think super highly of those guys, and she did such an amazing job on that I've been kind of, that would be a really fun. I've thought about mural work in my own work and getting some of that, and it would be. I wonder if there's some of that on there. I'll have to go on and check it out.
Right.
So cool. Thanks for the tip.
Yep, totally. That's one of the goals I have for us, for our glass business. But what about for you for thinking about the podcast? I mean, maybe we can have our little business meeting out loud for people here.
Sure. Well, it's always fun to get people's takes. And I threw that out there on social media about like, what would you like to hear us talk about? I'd like to do more panel stuff.
Nice.
We flirted with this idea, talking to Dolan and Allie Marie Guyman about doing some marketing talks and doing some talks about that. Having some past guests like, Marjolin Vanderhart's focus on her talk was early on in the podcast, and it was very specific. And those are some of the talks that I'd like to get into and have maybe more of a panel and get like, there are so many interesting things. I swear we could have Chris Dahlquist on every week if she ever had the time.
Okay,
but, she just does so many different things with the artist community in Kansas City. So talking to some of the people that branch out and keep themselves well balanced.
Right.
And we've been lucky enough to talk to so many of our kind of artistic heroes, and getting some of those guys back on to maybe talk to each other would be fun. And there are so many other new voices, getting some younger people. I've got a kind of a running tally wish list, and I've flirted with the idea of talking to other people actually on the show. So following up on some of those.
Cool.
But
I love that.
how about you? What do you think?
Well, I've really enjoyed our 3-person talks that you and I have been having with a guest. And I think I would like to explore more of those because I think we both bring some different, interesting aspects to the table.
I think so too. I would love that. I love that groove we hit with Sarah Collier.
Yeah.
And we also did one with Ben Fry that just seemed like kind of a living room kind of discussion where we're just chatting. So I love that kind of, we hit a nice comfort level with those. So more of that. For sure.
And I
like that dynamic.
We are always keeping our eyes peeled for the story that is just like, it's that inspirational story of like defying all odds kind of thing. And also the idea of representation, the story that maybe the masses don't always know, and kind of peeling back what's happening behind the surface of the struggles that they go through to perhaps be in this business and learn.
It's interesting that you bring that up because there are a couple of people that I've run across this year that still kind of have day jobs,
right.
And they're juggling those, kind of getting their art business off the ground and still doing some teaching or still doing some consulting. And it's all about the hustle and how you do that, and they're comfortable doing that, and that's how their life works. And certainly, God, absolutely no judgment there.
Yeah.
More of just interest. I'm just more interested in the fact that is how they are still rolling. It's like, okay, well, what would it take to get you to not do it? Or would you ever not do that if it's something that enlightens you and keeps you creative and productive?
So what you're saying as a means to like help get them over the hump so it is like a full-time thing, or just getting in their head as to how they juggle both?
Yeah, both really. Yeah. And no, again, I don't have any judgment in this business as far as what it goes, as long as you're making your own work and you're just out there hustling. It's just however it works is how it works for you, right?
I mean, there's so much to having a connected life. If the struggle with reconciling around work that sells versus not making work at all, you know what I mean? Or making the work you really want, but it doesn't sell, or whatever that struggle is. If that is too difficult to maneuver and having that regular income, then you're making the work you want to make and you're supporting yourself, and it all is good. You have figured out what the right path for you is, and that's amazing. So we support all of that.
Right. Hell yeah. If there's somebody out there making, $50,000 on average at a show and somebody out there working just as hard, making $5,000, I don't care. This is who we're talking to. These are our people, this is who we're interviewing and producing the show for.
We hate to put it out there that people might think that we come across as we're experts or something, because we're still all figuring it out. We just want to have the conversations with each other and other artists so that it all just gets talked about to normalize our experience, because we're all going through it. We're all different nuances about it. So
that's why we bring so many different people on there, because we have so many different unique perspectives. And I certainly don't know. I don't know. I'm sure you disagree with a lot of the stuff that I say. And I know we kind of butt heads occasionally on different topics, but that's what makes it fun. And I know that because we're just two voices, there are another million different voices out there that do things a different way.
Yeah.
So it's fun to bring some of that to light and keep it going. And it sounds to me like we're kind of running up against the wall here. I think we did a good job today.
I think it's time to wrap it up and get on to what other stuff we need to do today.
Go ice that foot. Get that thing up in the air.
Get the foot up, and you go get that jeweler's bench from the curb to the house.
Exactly. All right.
Take care, everyone, and we'll see you out there on the road.
We'll see you on the road. This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.